Every office has that one guy who thinks confidence is a substitute for competence. Mine was named Greg. Greg had a corner office, a golf handicap he brought up unprompted at least twice a week, and a nickname for me that he apparently thought was hilarious: the couch sitter. Because, in his professional opinion, I sat at my desk, read contracts, and didn't do real work. You know, the boring stuff, like reading, in a job that was checks notes entirely about reading contracts. 6 weeks after Greg cracked that joke for what felt like the 400th time, in front of the entire department, at a meeting where I was specifically trying to warn him about something important, that same contract cost the company $100,000 in penalties. And it cost Greg his job. So let's talk about how a man who couldn't be bothered to read a service agreement ended up starring in his own cautionary tale. I worked as a contracts administrator for a regional facilities management company, the kind of business that handles maintenance contracts for office buildings, hospitals, school districts, that sort of thing. Not glamorous. Nobody puts contracts administrator on a dating profile. But here's the thing about contracts. They're basically landmines wearing business casual. Every clause, every deadline, every shall be completed within phrase is a promise with a price tag attached if you break it. My entire job was reading those promises so the company didn't accidentally step on one. I flagged deadlines. I tracked penalty clauses. I sent reminder emails that, I'll admit, probably felt annoying to receive, the way a smoke detector feels annoying right up until the moment it doesn't. Greg was the regional operations manager. Big personality, bigger ego, allergic to anything that came in the form of a PDF longer than 2 pages. His entire management philosophy could be summarized as figure it out, which worked out fine for him, because he was never the one figuring anything out. That was me, the couch sitter. 3 months before the incident, we signed a new facilities contract with a hospital network, a big client, the kind you really don't want to disappoint, because hospitals tend to have lawyers who bill by the hour and enjoy their jobs a little too much. Buried on page 34 of that contract, riveting reading, truly, I recommend it for insomnia, was a clause about HVAC maintenance response times. If a climate control issue in any patient care area wasn't addressed within 4 hours of being reported, the contract triggered an automatic penalty. Not a warning. Not a strongly worded email. An automatic financial penalty, scaling up the longer the issue went unresolved, specifically because HVAC failures in a hospital aren't a minor inconvenience. They can affect patient safety, medication storage, even surgical suites. I flagged this clause the week we signed the contract. I flagged it again a month later when I noticed our maintenance dispatch software wasn't set up to prioritize hospital tickets differently from, say, a leaky faucet in an office break room. I sent Greg an email. Then another one. Then, because email apparently requires a translator in some offices, I brought it up in person in a team meeting, specifically asking if we could reconfigure the dispatch priority system before it became a problem. Greg's response, verbatim, more or less, "We don't need to overthink this. It's fine. Some of us have actual work to do instead of reading contracts all day, couch sitter." The room laughed. Not because it was funny. Because Greg was the boss, and laughing at the boss's jokes is a survival skill, not a personality trait. 6 weeks later, a climate control unit failed in a hospital's oncology pharmacy, the room where they store temperature-sensitive medications. Somebody submitted a maintenance ticket through our system. Because the dispatch software still wasn't set up to flag hospital priority tickets, exactly the thing I'd been asking about for 6 weeks, that ticket sat in a general queue behind a request to fix a squeaky office chair. 9 hours later, someone realized nobody had shown up. 9 hours. Against a 4-hour contractual window. In a pharmacy storing medication that needed to stay within a specific temperature range. I want to be very clear that nobody's health was harmed. The hospital had backup protocols and caught it before anything spoiled, but nobody got hurt and no contractual penalty are 2 very different sentences, and the hospital's legal team knew exactly which sentence they were dealing with. The penalty clause activated automatically, per the contract Greg had decided not to read. $100,000, scaled based on response time and category severity, due within 30 days. Not negotiable. Not let's talk about it over golf. Just an invoice, with the contract's own language quoted back at us. Page 34. The exact clause I had personally flagged and personally been mocked for flagging. Regional leadership called an emergency meeting to figure out how this happened. Greg, to his credit, and I say this with the driest possible tone, tried to pin it on a systems issue, which, in fairness, was technically true. It was a systems issue. Specifically, the system where he had ignored the person whose entire job was preventing exactly this. Then somebody from corporate asked the question that ended Greg's little kingdom. Was this risk ever flagged internally before the incident? I hadn't planned to say anything. I genuinely hadn't. But I also don't lie in meetings when directly asked a factual question, so I said calmly, yes. I flagged it 3 times over 6 weeks, twice by email, once in a team meeting, recommending we reprioritize hospital tickets in the dispatch system before this became a liability. You could have heard a pin drop if pins made noise over the sound of Greg's entire face rearranging itself into something resembling panic. Corporate asked for the emails. I had them, time-stamped, exactly as sent, including the one where Greg replied with a single word, noted. Which, it turns out, is not a legally protective response when noted is followed by 6 weeks of doing absolutely nothing. Here's where I'll admit I allowed myself one moment of quiet, professional satisfaction. Someone in the meeting, trying to lighten the mood, badly said something like, well, at least we know who's actually reading these contracts around here. Greg, sensing the room turning, tried to laugh it off. Yeah, our resident couch sitter always got her head in a binder. Nobody laughed this time. Corporate leadership doesn't tend to find humor in nicknames for the one employee who just saved the company from looking even worse than it already did in front of a hospital's legal department. One of the regional VPs actually said, flatly, I think couch sitter just saved this division a considerable amount of future liability. Let's move on. If you have never watched a grown man's ego deflate in real time in a conference room, I recommend it. It's better than most television. The $100,000 penalty stood. Contracts don't care about excuses, only about whether the clause was triggered, and it was. But the internal fallout landed almost entirely on Greg. An investigation found that dispatch prioritization had been flagged multiple times and ignored at the regional manager level, which is corporate language for this is specifically your fault, Greg, and we have the paper trail to prove it. He was let go within the month. Not fired dramatically, no security escort, no box on a chair. Companies like that tend to handle executive-level exits quietly, with a severance agreement and a firm request to update his LinkedIn without mentioning specifics. But gone is gone, regardless of how politely it's dressed up. Me? I got put in charge of a full audit of our dispatch prioritization system, with actual authority to fix the thing I'd been asking someone to fix for 6 weeks. I also got a promotion, a new title with the word risk in it, and I'll be honest, an office with a door, which after years of being called a couch sitter from an open floor plan, felt like a small, extremely satisfying victory. Here's the moral if you want one. The person quietly reading the fine print isn't wasting time. They're the reason the building's still standing when everyone else was too busy laughing to check the paperwork. Greg thought competence meant volume, loud opinions, big gestures. A good golf story. It turns out competence mostly looks like somebody sitting quietly with a contract, catching the problem 6 weeks before it becomes a 6-figure one. I didn't sabotage Greg. I didn't leak anything. I didn't set a trap. I didn't even raise my voice in that meeting. I just did my job, kept my receipts, and answered a direct question honestly when it finally mattered. Sometimes the most devastating thing you can do to somebody who underestimated you is exactly nothing. Just let the paperwork they refuse to read speak for itself. If this one hit home, make sure you're subscribed to Hidden Truth Chronicles. We've got plenty more stories of quiet employees who turned out to be the smartest person in the room the entire time. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated at work, only to be the one who saved the day? See you in the next story.